I want to be clear about one thing before anyone accuses me of embellishing. I did not invite Vexthara onto my cot. I was unconscious. There is a difference, and I will keep saying it until people stop laughing. The suit had cooked itself 2 hours into my shift. The coolant line split. The internal temperature spiked past anything a human body should tolerate, and by the time I got the thing off me, my skin felt like it had been left too close to a stove. So I stripped it off, along with everything else, and collapsed onto my bunk like a felled tree. Sleep hit me the way it only does after your body has been that close to overheating. Total, black, dreamless. I woke because I could not breathe. 400 pounds of Kalen Warcast pressed me flat against the cot. One massive hand was splayed over my chest. The other was braced against the wall behind my head. Her mane quills were up, every single one of them, rigid like a warning sign. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the ceiling, at the door, at every shadow in the room. She was scanning for danger. "Vex," I managed. "Vex, I can't feel my ribs." "Quiet," she said. Her voice had dropped into a low register, the one her people use when they are coordinating in combat. "Something is in the ductwork." That is when I heard it too. A dry scraping sound, metal against metal, moving along the ceiling vents in a rhythm too steady to be the station simply settling in the cold. "Nest drones," she said. "Scout class. They hunt by heat. Your suit overheated the whole room before it failed. You were a beacon." Her hand did not move from my chest. "I reached you before it did. That is the only reason you are alive to complain about your ribs." I wanted on record that in that moment, I did not think about being completely undressed beneath a warrior twice my size. I want that on record. Nobody believes me, but I want it on record anyway. The scraping stopped directly above us. Vexthara went still, and so, out of pure instinct, did I. Then it dropped. I have read the reports on nest drones since that night. Chitin armor, blade-like limbs, built to break through a suit's outer layer and leave something behind that should never be left behind. What I actually experienced was a blur of motion, a screech of metal, and Vexthara's free arm, coming up in one smooth strike, that ended the threat before it ever reached me. She flicked the remains off my chest, like they were nothing more than dust. "You're welcome," she said. I lay there, with my heart slamming against my ribs, staring up at a 9-foot alien straddling me, and I said the only thing that felt right in that moment. "Could you maybe get off me now?" She looked down at me properly for the first time since she had pinned me, and something in her expression shifted. "You are not afraid," she said. It was not a question. It almost sounded like an accusation. "I'm terrified," I said. "I'm just also pinned under a warrior built like a small mountain, so screaming didn't seem like it would improve my odds." The sound she made then was a series of quick clicks deep in her throat. I would learn later that this was how her people laughed. She climbed off me and tossed a blanket over my shoulders without being asked, which struck me as strange kindness from a species that does not even feel cold the way we do. "You're kind," she said, watching me wrap the blanket around myself. "Keep surprising me. You nearly died, and your first thought was manners." "My first thought was my ribs. Manners came second." She crouched by the door, quills still half raised, eyes fixed on the vent for any more movement. "There will be others. The nest never sends scouts alone." "Wonderful. Love that for us. We hold this room until the light cycle turns." She glanced back at me, and for a moment, the hard edge in her expression softened into something closer to respect. "Get dressed, human. I did not save you from the drone, just to lose you to a chill." I got dressed. She stayed by that door the entire night, quills raised, and nothing else came near my cot. That was 3 months ago. I want to tell you what happened after, because the story people tell about that night is not the whole story, and I think the rest of it matters more. The morning after the attack, the station commander called an emergency briefing. 12 nest drones had been found dead across 3 different sectors, all destroyed within the same hour. Mine had been the only one that got as far as a crew compartment. The commander wanted to know how a Scout-class drone had made it past our outer sensors without triggering a single alarm. Nobody had an answer. Nobody except Vexthara, who stood at the back of the briefing room with her arms crossed and said, quite plainly, that the nest was not sending scouts anymore. It was sending a signal. Something bigger was coming, and the drones had been testing our defenses to see where we were weakest. The room went quiet. Most of the humans in that briefing had spent the last 6 months treating the Kalen delegation as guests, who happened to be useful in a fight. Watching Vexthara lay out a threat assessment better than half our own tactical officers changed something in the room. I watched it change. I watched people who had barely spoken to her before suddenly lean forward and listen. I should explain who the Kalen are, for anyone reading this who was not stationed out here. They arrived at our colony 8 months before I did. Refugees from a war none of us fully understood, fleeing something they called the Hollow Swarm. At first, the alliance between our two peoples was uneasy. They were stronger than us, faster than us, built for combat in a way that made half the station nervous just walking past them in the corridors. But they had lost their homeworld, and we had a station that needed defending. And somewhere in that arrangement, a partnership had formed. Uneasy, practical, not yet trust. The night the drone came for me changed that, at least for our sector. Vexthara did not treat what happened as something worth discussing further. To her, she had done her duty, and the matter was closed. But I found myself thinking about it constantly. Not the fear, though that lingered too, but the strangeness of being protected by someone who barely knew me. I had spoken to her maybe 4 times before that night, mostly in passing, mostly about equipment logistics. She had no reason to throw herself between me and danger, except that it was, in her words, what a warrior does. I decided I wanted to understand her people better, partly out of gratitude, partly, if I am honest, out of curiosity, that had nothing to do with gratitude at all. I started showing up at the mess hall during the hours the Kalen ate, which were different from ours, because their internal clocks ran on a longer cycle. At first she barely acknowledged me. She would eat in silence at the end of a long table, quills relaxed but never fully at ease, and I would sit a respectful distance away and ask questions she mostly answered in one word. What's the quill thing about? Mood. All of it? Every mood? Enough of them. It was not exactly a conversation, but she kept letting me sit there, which I decided to take as a good sign. Slowly, the one-word answers became sentences. The sentences became stories. She told me about her homeworld, a place with 3 moons and skies that turned violet at dusk, and about the war that had taken it from her people. She spoke about the Hollow Swarm the way you would speak about weather that never stopped, something you learned to live around because you had no choice. She told me the nest drones were the smallest part of the swarm, scouts sent ahead of something far larger and far worse, and that her people had been running from it for longer than I had been alive. I told her about home too, about a planet she had never seen, and probably never would, about family I had not spoken to in years, because deep space postings do that to people. She listened the way she fought, completely focused, nothing held back. 3 weeks after the drone attack, the station's sensor net picked up something at the edge of our system. Not drones this time, a ship, large enough that our long-range scanners struggled to get a clean reading, moving on a course that put it on an intercept path with our colony in 11 days. The commander called every senior officer and every Kalen Warcast member into the same briefing room. I was not senior anything, just an engineer who happened to know the station's systems better than most people twice my rank, so I was there to answer technical questions if they came up. Vexthara stood at the front with 3 other Warcast warriors, laying out what they knew about ships that size, ships that moved the way the Hollow Swarm moved. "It is a carrier," she said. "It does not fight directly. It seeds smaller vessels ahead of it, the way the scouts seeded ahead of the main body. If it reaches orbit, we will face more than drones." The commander asked what she recommended. I watched her go still for a moment, the way she had gone still the night the drone dropped from the vent, calculating. "Evacuate what you can, fortify what you cannot, and target the carrier before it releases anything, because once it does, we will be fighting 100 smaller battles instead of one large one." It was not a comforting plan, but it was a plan, and for the first time since the Kalen had arrived on our station, I watched human officers and Kalen warriors work through the details together instead of around each other. Vexthara's people knew things about the swarm that our sensors could never have told us. Our engineers knew the station's weapons systems better than any refugee fleet ever could. Between the two, something workable started to take shape. I was assigned to the weapons refit team, converting mining lasers into something with enough punch to matter against a target that size. It was ugly work, done fast, done with equipment never designed for it. Vexthara found me there most nights, watching me solder connections that should have taken a full engineering crew, and eventually she stopped just watching and started handing me tools before I asked for them. "You don't have to be here," I told her, somewhere around midnight on the fourth day. "I know," she said. "Then why are you?" She considered the question longer than I expected. "Because you did not run the night the drone came. You made a joke instead. I have decided that means something about your kind worth understanding." I did not have a clever answer for that, so I just handed her the next tool in the sequence and let her hand it back to me when I needed it again. It became a rhythm between us, something steady in the middle of work that had no room for anything steady. The 11 days passed faster than anyone wanted them to. On the 9th day, the carrier released its first wave, smaller ships that our scanners read as drone carriers, exactly as Vexthara had predicted. The station went to full alert. Every weapon we had refit was brought online. Every Kalan warrior and every human soldier took up position along the outer hull, because the strategy had shifted from evacuation to defense once it became clear there was nowhere close enough to run. I was stationed near the primary weapons array, close enough to the fighting that I could hear it even through the hull plating. Vexthara was assigned to the same sector, and somewhere in the chaos of that first wave, I understood why. She had requested it. She never said so directly, but the commander let something slip afterward, and I never forgot it. The battle lasted 6 hours. I will not pretend I remember all of it clearly, because fear does strange things to memory, cutting some moments sharp and blurring others into nothing. I remember the weapons array holding when we thought it would fail. I remember Vexthara standing between me and a drone carrier that broke through the outer defense line, the same way she had stood between me and the scout drone in my quarters. Except this time, I was not lying helpless beneath her. This time I was standing beside her, running the very weapon that finally brought the carrier down. When it was over, the larger ship retreated. Not defeated, but delayed. Its scouting mission failed. Its smaller vessels destroyed before they could do what they were built to do. It was not a victory in the way stories usually tell victories. Nobody cheered. Everyone was too tired, and too aware of how close it had come to going the other way. But we had held, and holding was enough. Vexthara found me afterward, sitting against the weapons array with my hands still shaking from adrenaline I had no more use for. She sat down beside me without a word, quills finally, fully relaxed for the first time since I had known her. "You did well," she said. "I soldered wires and pressed buttons someone told me to press." "You did not run," she said. "Twice now. You have not run." "I am starting to think it is simply who you are." I laughed, mostly from exhaustion. "Is that a compliment?" "From my people, it is the highest one there is." We sat there a long time, not saying much else, watching the retreating carrier shrink into a point of light on the horizon monitors. I thought about the night she had pinned me to my cot, terrified and confused, and certain I was about to die, and how strange it was that the same event had led here, to this moment, sitting beside her with the station still standing, and both of us still breathing. They tell stories about us now, across both the human and Kalan sections of the station. Most of them focus on the drone, on the joke I made while pinned beneath a warrior, with alien remains still smoking nearby. Some of them exaggerate. In one version I fought the drone myself. I did not. Vexthara did, and she corrects anyone who claims otherwise, usually loudly, usually with her quills raised in something that is not quite anger, and not quite pride, but somewhere comfortably between the two. What the stories leave out is everything that came after. The quiet meals in the mess hall, the tools passed back and forth in a workshop at midnight, the 11 days that became a partnership neither of our peoples had expected to find in each other. I think that part matters more than the joke ever did, even if it makes for a less exciting story around a table. Vexthara still corrects people about the drone. She still insists I was not afraid, even though I have told her a dozen times that I was terrified out of my mind. I have stopped arguing with her about it, because I think, in her own way, she is not talking about that night at all. I think she is talking about the version of me that decided to keep showing up afterward, in the mess hall, in the workshop, on the hull during a battle neither of us was certain we would survive. Maybe that is the part that mattered to her all along. And if the hollow swarm ever sends something larger than a carrier our way, I already know where I will be standing when it arrives. Beside her. Not because I am fearless, because I have learned that some people are worth standing beside, fear and all.